All right, everyone. Welcome so much. Happy to have you guys here. Sumo Logic's brown bag session. We're going to dig into service level objectives today, or SLOs. We have one of our internal experts, Duncan. He's going to walk you guys through some good stuff today. I'm David Girvin. I'm a technical advocate for Sumo Logic, which I'm not sure what I really do here, but a little bit of everything. Um, our normal host, Lisa, is out, but thank you guys so much for joining us. And I'm just going to get out of the way. And Duncan, if you want to kick it off, get going, brother.
No problem. Thanks for the kind introduction there, David. Okay, so I'm Duncan McKendrick. I'm a senior technical account engineer here at Sumo Logic. I've been working in observability for around 6 to 7 years now, in multiple capacities from professional services to solution architecture to now as a senior technical account engineer here at Sumo Logic. And the presentation that I want to do today for all of you is about observability and service level objectives, or SLOs for short. What I hope to cover in this session with you all are what SLOs are, what the key terms and key parts of that make up an SLO, the benefits of SLOs and what they offer you as either companies, teams, individuals, engineering managers, etc., as well as then going into how best to define SLOs and finally a demo. So just a brief look at the agenda. So what are SLOs? Key terms, the benefits, how to define, and then we'll walk into a demo where I'll show you a number of different ways that you can configure your SLOs within the Sumo Logic platform, how you can attach those to monitors so that you can alert on them, the fantastic pre-built dashboards that come with them so they save you time, and a number of other cool features that come with our SLOs. So with no further ado, what are SLOs? So service level objectives, SLOs for short, basically allow you to track key metrics or goals for your organization or team. Typically, these are going to be around, if you're looking at reliability space or as observability space, they're probably going to be around performance, availability, reliability. So that's going to be your metrics such as your golden signals, so latency, error rate, uptime, or availability. And I've been having this conversation for a number of years now, and often there is a rebuttal. That is, we already track MTTX, or MTTR, MTTD, MTTI. Why do we need, or why would we need SLOs? So I believe these complement one another. MTTX is going nowhere, and it shouldn't go anywhere. They're relatively important metrics in terms of tracking how long it is taking you to respond to incidents, to resolve incidents, to actually detect problems. So they are key metrics for any business that needs to observe their software. SLOs give you a backbone to that, which allow you to become potentially more proactive, and you can track data or these key goals over periods of time, so rolling periods. That be it a day, a week, a quarter, a month, or even, yearly. So that is why it isn't a case as to a blog that I read recently which pretty much stated that MTTX is dead and to be replaced by SLOs. That isn't true, and I want that to come across strongly in this presentation. It isn't a case of dropping your toy MTTX and replacing it with SLOs. There is a place for your MTTR or MTT metrics, and it's still very important that you have them. SLOs complement them and allow you to create a better observability solution. So what are the key terms? What makes up an SLO? So the first and the most basic building block of an SLO is your SLI, or service level indicator. And your service level indicator is essentially that core metric. It's that metric that you want to track. So just bringing us back to the golden signals here. That's going to be your error rate. That's going to be response time or latency, uptime. That might be a metric that you have. And you as a business need to pick which ones are important to you. Once you have that metric, you're then going to define a goal, which is the service level objective itself. So that's like saying we want to have 99% of our requests to this particular service need to respond in less than 1 second, or as I have as my example here, 1000 milliseconds. So that's an example of an SLO definition, and something that you're going to be tracking over these rolling periods. There is a second type of SLO that is also known as a service level agreement, which I believe everyone in the room has probably heard of. This is still an SLO, but this is more like a public facing one. It's a promise that you've made to either your customers if you're a SaaS platform, or it's a promise you've made to your users. So hypothetically, if you are a SaaS platform, you're likely to be saying we need to be available to our customers 99.9% of the time. So that would be an agreement that you have with your customer base. So that would be a service level agreement. So they're the kind of key terms that I want to kind of put in to this presentation around SLOs. And the benefits that you get from implementing SLOs into your business are numerous. I've picked five, because otherwise I could talk for till the donkeys come home. But I've picked five here, and some of these I do have information to back these up because there was a study done in 2022 and there was an SLO study done once again in 2023 where a wider audience of companies were asked about how they utilize SLOs, if they do, what benefits they found from them. So I've picked some of those from that just so I can back it up with some data. So from that 2023 study, 71% of the people surveyed responded with it improved the reliability of their systems. 43% said it reduced MTTR, which is fabulous because you can see how they complement one another now. 88% said it saved them $50,000 annually, while 27% said it saved them $500,000 annually. Now that's some huge cost savings just by implementing some goals that you can track over time for your company and being able to observe your platform in that way. 95% indicated it improved better business decisions. So that comes from having SLOs that might actually span across different business units, provide better insight and decisions that the business might make. The fifth benefit that I'm including here is proactive observability. And this is something I'm quite passionate about myself right now, is as the observability landscape changes and evolves, we are moving from a reactive view to a more proactive approach to observability. And SLOs give you that in the sense that you are looking at this goal that you've set and then you're tracking it over time and you can see that and you can alert on that and you can say, yeah, we have no room for errors anymore at this point. We've hit our error budget or things like that. It allows you to have a more proactive approach to observability, and it's fantastic in that respect. So with all that in mind, how do we go about defining SLOs for either you individually, your team if you're a manager, if you're a director or an executive for your particular business unit? How do you go about defining those SLOs? And I'm just going to pause here for a second because, as I said previously, I was a professional services consultant, and I've seen lots of people and I've spoken to lots of people and lots of reliability engineers who have tried to implement SLOs, and visited many customer sites. And I've got a quote for you, which is actually a quote from me, which I'm making just now, which is something I've encountered over the years, is some companies have very well-defined SLOs, while many others have some, but a surprising amount have none. And it comes down to blockers, or at least typically time. So you could have a passionate member of staff, and that member of staff or a passionate team who are looking after a service, but they might have their own SLOs, but that might be tracked on secretive spreadsheets that they keep hidden for everybody else because the business has no want to create these goals. There needs to be a drive from management, at least, to try and give engineering teams, reliability teams, or even it could be your marketing team, by the way, the ability to actually sit down and have time to create these SLOs, to then build them into your systems, to then be able to track them. You need to give your team members time to do this. And what I found was many companies didn't, and they didn't recognize the benefit of SLOs. Well, some clearly do. Um, that's just a little quote from me. So how do we take that and then how do we define them? So the first is to identify the core service level indicators to you. And that's very important. So they have to be important to you. I wouldn't recommend going around and just picking some random metrics, and I am going to default like a broken record back to golden signals, pretty much because they're the four things that you're probably going to be looking at, typically through monitors already. That and they're quite easy ones to pick because you're going to want your service to respond quickly. You're going to want your service to be available. You don't want it to error, and you want it to be not so saturated. So your CPU, your memory usage. Although in my opinion, that's a harder one to do an SLO on, so I tend to stick with a three. But that's kind of what we need to do. You need to pick SLIs that are relevant to you. And if you are bringing in, say, business information into Sumo Logic, which I do recommend, by the way, so that might be sales, it could be the amount of cash coming in, etc. That could also be something you could track if you have that in metric form. Well, you don't even need it in metric form. I'll show you in a moment. You can do log queries. That's fine. So once you've got your SLI, we then want to set realistic SLOs. And that's very important that we focus on the word realistic. Let's not get too ambitious for something that you can't do or can't achieve because you'll just look at it and be disappointed every time you see you're not hitting that value. Let's pick something that's realistic. Make sure that you can achieve it. It needs to be an achievable goal. Some examples of these could be search requests return in less than or equal to 1 second. Your service is available 99% of the time, and you have, say, less than 10% error rate. Now, the funny thing is that one is very achievable, in my opinion. Depending on how you track errors, once again, ex-professional services here, I've seen some platforms which log errors all of the time, but their errors are considered normal, which does make observing them quite difficult. So that might have been reasonable at the time. But you could be a bit more specific with that one. And then what do you do once you've got your SLOs? Well, you're going to want to monitor them. You're going to want to make sure they were realistic in the first place and they are working in the way that you expect them to work. So monitor them. Then you can basically incrementally update them as you need to, or you can add new ones. And the interesting thing, if you do that in Sumo Logic, we actually version our SLOs. So if you do make changes, you will see that version number go up over time. You can then visualize your SLOs on dashboards, and Sumo Logic gives you a pre-built dashboard for every SLO, so you don't need to spend half a day to a day trying to come up with the queries yourself. We give you that out of the box once the SLO is generated, and you'll see shortly that doesn't take very long. You can then also alert on this information because we store it, and you can build monitors on it, and you can hook your monitors up to your SLOs. So fundamentally, they're the things that I think would make a good SLO and the practices to follow once you've got them. So let's go look at them. Let's go create some SLOs. Let's go look at some dashboards, and let's go try and look at some of the other features that we offer with service level objectives here at Sumo Logic. Oh, watch out. There be dragons here. And I mean that. There is something I haven't mentioned. That is the when I repeat realistic, I do mean it because there's something that I've nicknamed the rule of nines. Now, some people refer to it as five nines, but I'm going to call it the rule of nines because it doesn't necessarily mean it has to always be five nines. But the more nines you add on, so say you say I want to be 99% available, or I want to be 99.9% available, the less leeway you have in failure. So using availability as an example here, if I'm a SaaS solution, or say I'm AWS, for example, and lots of people use my solution to host their solutions to build up on, I'm probably going to want to be 99.9999 available. But that only gives me a small amount of time to actually be down if I'm ever down. Yearly, that particular metric or that particular SLO only allows me 5.2 minutes of downtime in a year. In a month, that's 26.3 seconds. In a week, that's 6 seconds. And in a day, that's 0.86 seconds, which is actually 861 milliseconds, I think. 861 milliseconds in a day. So you don't have lost long, which essentially means you need to have lots of redundancy in your system, which increases cost. It's expensive to run at five nines. You have smaller budgets, as I've just described there. You don't have much leeway until you're breaching your SLO. and it's much harder to achieve. So that is important that we do focus on them being realistic. So now I've said that and we've tamed that dragon, let's move on to our demo. So bear with me a moment while I just get to the home screen of Sumo Logic. So for this demonstration, I am going to be using our training environment. I don't know if anyone on the call is familiar with our training environment. We do offer the training environment free to every customer who has Sumo Logic. And if you want to follow along with me in this session, you are completely free to do so. So you can click on, if from your home screen, if you tap the Learn button, go to Get Certified, and then become a Sumo Logic expert, you'll have a link to the training environment and you'll be able to pick an analyst ID that you would like to use, and then you can follow along with me as we progress through this. So from the home screen, if I want to create an SLO, I need to go to, and I'm using the new UI, by the way. I did mean to mention that at the beginning. So I'm going to be using the new UI for all of this demo, mainly because it surfaces your alert section on the left-hand menu just here. And then we can see SLOs quite quickly. We can easily get to that relevant area of the application. So I'm just going to navigate to SLOs here. And then if you are following along with me today, feel free to create a folder, try to keep it organized. I've got one here with my initials DM SLOs. So in here, we've got an SLO I created earlier, some old ones from test demonstrations I've done. But for now, let me just hide my face. Oh, I'm just going to click Add and then do a new SLO. And we're going to walk through the define your SLO screen. And I'm going to talk to you about what everything means on here. So the first thing first, as I said, we need to define our SLI. So that's going to be our metric. And for this, I'm actually going to pick an error rate of an application. So we're going to be looking at the number of requests coming in there, errors versus successful request or overall requests to see how well we're doing in that respect. And I've got two types of sources I can pick. So I can pick query based for my SLO, which is essentially either a logs or a metrics query, or I can pick monitor based. For now, we're going to do query based, and I'm going to revert back to monitor based after we've done this, and we'll see how to create a SLO directly from one of your existing monitors shortly. So we're going to select query based, and then we choose a signal type. So funnily enough, even Sumo Logic has focused on the four golden signals here. So latency, error, throughput, and availability. Then we have a fifth option for other if it doesn't fall under one of those headings. So this is kind of like a tag really, so that you can easily pull which SLOs are related to what type of metric. So I'm going to choose error, and then we come to evaluation type. The evaluation type will determine how your events are measured. This is quite important. So for what I want to do here, I want to look at how many requests are good out of my total request and say I want 99% of my total requests to be not 500s. So I'm going to use request based. So I've got two queries that I'm going to need for that. Or we could choose window based, which works on a similar idea if we are using the ratio based logic here, where we set a window size and we define what our window for success is, and then we can pick periods of time. We are going to be looking at both of these methods today, but for this initial starting point, we're going to go for request based. And then we pick our query type, either logs or metrics. For this, I'm going to use a log query, but you can choose to use metric queries if you have those metrics already. That's completely fine. So do what you will. And so then we come to our actual definition. There are two types of definition. So at the moment, we're looking at a ratio definition. So that's where we have successful events over total events, or you can go for a threshold-based definition, which is more basic, a bit more classical in my opinion, where you're taking a value and so you might put a log search in here. It's going to return some kind of value, whichever field we pick from our values list. We are then going to say it must meet this criteria, and that's how we determine whether or not we're failing the SLO or not. For this example, we're going to go into ratio based, and you have two different queries that you need to add. So the first is, can you define your successful or your unsuccessful events? And the second is the total number of events that you're going to be having for that sum. So I'm actually lazy and I'm going to pick unsuccessful events. The reason I'm doing that is because it's a much shorter query. So let me just paste my query here. So what I'm looking for here is I'm looking at the source category labs, Apache, and access. So I'm looking at my access logs for Apache. And I'm bringing back any logs which have a status code of any form of 500 error. And then for my total events query, I'm going to just get rid of that. And then we have our two queries. So I'm just going to run this, and then I'm going to run this one. Just going to switch this to 24 hours. And then this brings back returned count, which works for me perfectly well. But if you had done a more complex query, if you've added custom fields in or brought back other field types that you want to do and done some sums, etc., you can select the field from this list that you want to use. You're not limited to using returned row count. I'm just doing that to keep the example fairly simple. Our query preview gives us the results of our query, so we can see our total events here. And then we can see our actual error events here. So these are unsuccessful events. One of the things that you might be asking at this point is, Duncan, didn't you say it needs to be successful events over total events? Sumo Logic, because I've selected unsuccessful events, Sumo Logic will work out the difference for me. I just did that because it's a simpler query. Then we come to define our SLO, and we're going to say 99% of a period, a compliance period must be successful requests. There are two types of compliance period. You have rolling period, which is effectively defined by days, by the way. So you can say 1 day, you could say 365 days. I can also choose calendar, and this gives predefined periods. So that's your week, where you choose what day represents the beginning of your week. We can choose month, and we can choose quarter. So they're the different calendar parts available to you. But for this demonstration, I'm going to use rolling, and I'm going to say 1 day. Nice and simple. Then we give our SLO a name. So I'm just going to call this DM dash Apache error SLO. We can give it an optional description, and we can give it tags. Tags are quite useful for if you want to use some of the more advanced features around SLOs, in the sense that you can tag them with useful information that you can use to bring back only relevant service level objectives in particular searches that you want to do. If you're going to be dashboarding them or building monitors out the back of them, that might be relevant to you. So for this one, I'm actually going to say service equals Apache, and I'm going to put purpose equals monitoring. You can define your own tags. You're not limited to the ones I've just used, by the way. They're just examples. And then we can save our SLO. So this will start generating the SLO for you, and we can see we're already about 34% generation. But let me take you to one in classic, in a Britishism, by the way, for those of you not from the UK. In classic Blue Peter style, here's one I made earlier. This is an availability, a service availability SLO. We can see that I've given it a type of availability. We have our SLI, where we're currently meeting it. You can see that listed at 97.22. My target of 99%. What my error budget is, so my remaining budget that I have, and the period that I've picked. So let's just jump in to see what this pre-built dashboard that I've been going on and on about looks like, and is it actually worth your time, which I definitely think it is. So we do this out of the box for you as soon as you've created your objective. And that is, we will give you information about your current indicator. We compare that to the target. We then give you your error budget. Now, some people get confused. Well, I don't think it's confusion. I think that's the wrong word. Error budget isn't named correctly. However, it seems to be, to me, that's the industry standard for naming of this particular functionality or calculation. What this actually is it's that 1%. So because I've picked 99% as my target, my actual budget is 1% of 100%. Um, and the calculation is it just works out how many requests or how much downtime I have until I've used up that particular 1%. That's what it's doing, and that's what it means by error budget. So I think typically this is if you're monitoring errors, it makes a bit more sense, but for availability, etc., it can be a bit confusing. I just wanted to kind of step right into that and tackle it. So you can see with this SLO, I'm actually breaching. So this is a day rolling period. We're at in the UK, it's currently 5:30. We can see I actually broke the SLO this morning at 20 to 1 this morning. It was already at 99% and then was at 98.6%. So that is the point where it broke. And over the course of the day, we can see that I've been down for 25 minutes and 36 seconds longer than I'm promising my customers I would be. We get this lovely error budget burn down here, which gives you the ideal path if you are going to be burning time over your compliance period. But then we also see the true path, the actual path that's been followed. And we have our target line here. So we can easily see at a glance on this screen that we've breached. Well, obviously, we get it from this number as well, but it's quite easy to see. We then have our event history here, which gives us our event history. So we can see this was a good period of time. So the difference between this particular SLO and the one we created earlier in the demonstration is this is a period-based SLO. So I'm using 20-minute periods where I'm working out whether or not the system was available during that time. And if it wasn't, it gets recorded as an unsuccessful window. And if it was, it gets recorded as a successful window. I don't have room for many unsuccessful windows. And the very bottom graph is the historical data graph. So I updated this SLO earlier because actually I'd created it the wrong way around. I actually said if the system was unavailable, it was all good. So forgive me for that. And it's currently regenerating some of the data down here for me. But this does populate, even for new SLOs, your periods will populate over time. So let's just jump back to the home screen here and we can see that our error SLO that we created together earlier has already populated. So I can see that my current SLI for today's rolling period is 99.18. So we're good, we're above 99%. And we have 18% of our error budget remaining. So let's just jump to that dashboard as well. Here we go. This looks much healthier than my other version. And once again, the historical data hasn't quite caught up yet. But we do have the event history here. So we can see everything's good and we can see our unsuccessful events. So this is slightly different because it is event-based. So just to give you that information here, so rather than being time-based, this says that I've got 504 error requests remaining until we have breached today. So if we just go back, I'm going to show you one that I created earlier, mainly because I want to just show you the historical data graph with more data on it. So here we have day periods. They would be quarter periods if you're using quarter, weekly periods if you're using weekly, etc. But you can see your target line, and then we can see how we're tracking over time for our historical compliance periods. We also have the ability to switch between compliance periods here. Let's get rid of that. And I could say, let's look at the 3rd of May. How did we do on the 3rd of May? 99.18. Good. We were good. We've not breached. We've met our SLO. So what's another way to create SLOs? I mentioned monitors, didn't I? So if we just jump back to the main menu here and go to alerts and then select monitors, I'm going to go to my lovely test folder here, DM test, and here's a monitor that I created earlier. Basically looking at CPU usage, so this could be considered saturation. And if I click on the ellipsis on the right-hand side of the screen, we can then go to create SLO. So this allows us to jump straight into that SLO builder, It's already selected monitor based. It has incorrectly selected latency, but I'm going to forgive the system for that because it's not actually built to automatically select that. So I'm going to select other, and it gives it a name. Well, it doesn't. It tells us which monitor we've selected. So if you were to do this with a brand new SLO, you'd have to manually select your monitor. Because we've come to the monitor screen, we've managed to do it easily. We then select our target. So we can say 99%, rolling period of 1 day. And it gives us the name. And then we can tag it. So we could say service equals EC2. And I can save that. And then if I go back to my alerts and we go back to SLOs, we will see DM EC2 instance. It has created it at this top level folder, but you can quite easily move it down to DM SLOs if needed. And it's generating it now. So that is quite a useful thing. It's quick, it's easy. It allows you to create that SLO off the back of a monitor. And I am going to show you that. But in the meantime, while this generates, let's take a look at how we would monitor our SLOs. Are there easy ways to create monitors from SLOs? Well, first things first, yes. You can either do it directly through the monitor screen by going to alerts and then monitors, creating a new monitor, and then effectively choosing the type of monitor to be SLO, or you can just jump to your SLO, and we can go edit. And if I go to edit of this SLO, I actually have a save and create monitor button at the bottom here, or save. Earlier on, you'll note I clicked save. The other way to do it is we can click the ellipsis here. Oh, no, more actions. No, no, okay, so I did actually think it was on that screen before. Add SLO monitor, it's just there that I can select it. I knew it was there. So for now, I'm just going to add SLO monitor to this SLO.
Hey,
So,
Duncan, can
yep.
we freeze for 1 second, answer a question?
Yeah, feel free.
Great. Nico asks, search request timing for latency monitoring. Do they automatically return their execution time? Do you monitor that by default, or we need exact extract through some regex from the log itself? If
Okay.
answer is no, we don't track log time. What are the easy ways other than parsing, regexing to track for SLI latency, maybe field extraction to set this SLI for each log entry?
Okay. So for latency, yes, it does depend on the data that you're ingesting into Sumo Logic. So if you're ingesting trace data, by the way, you do get latency for operations and services as metrics out of the box. If you are using metrics and your service is open telemetry and it's sending in metrics for stuff like that, you will have that also as a core metric. If it's just log data and you've essentially used um, and you do need to extract it, you can probably use a field extraction rule if it's an easy enough one. I don't recommend always using regex as the way to parse data out of a query. There are multiple parse statements that you can use now. So we have parse kind of general where you'd go through and use a star to parse data out, or you can use JSON, etc., depending on the data format that's coming in. But yes, regex would be an option. FERs is definitely the way I would do it to make it easier and quicker rather than you having to do it in any of the statements that we've just been looking at. So I used a log query earlier, and in theory, you could pass the data out in that, or you could use an FER and you'll have the field there automatically. I hope that answers your question.
I think we're good. Thanks, Duncan.
Okay, I'm just going to go jump to add SLO monitor. And here we are. So this is where it's selected monitor type. We've got your classicals, you've got logs and metrics, and you've got SLO. And this then allows me to create a monitor about my SLO on a couple of things. The first is the SLI. So you can say, if my SLI is below 99%, then can you please alert? Or we could say burn rate. So that's that error burn down. So you don't necessarily need it to be breaching your SLO at this point. You could say, if we've used 90% of our burn rate, please let me know. Please alert. And you can actually have multiple triggers in here. You don't, yeah, you can have for this. So They are what you can do with monitors. And the other part is obviously this gives you the toolkit to use the automation service via the automated playbooks just here, as well as any webhook integration that you might have with other systems that you're using, such as Slack, Jira, Teams, Fresh Service, ServiceNow, anything like that. If you're using any third-party kind of services that you want to notify, you can do that through the webhook or even automation if you want to build a playbook for it. That's perfectly reasonable. Um, I did miss one thing that's just come to my head while talking about monitors. So I said earlier that you can create SLOs based on monitors, and we have done that. So we created this one. One of the good use cases for creating SLOs off the back of monitors is typically if you're looking at reliability, the likelihood is you already have monitors set up monitoring the indicators you would be picking for SLOs. So rather than you having to go in and create a new SLO for each, basically reinvent the wheel, you can probably just create an SLO on your monitors and then you have your metric. So that solves it. And if we look at a monitor SLO, I love this. I've picked a really bad one. We're not doing well at all, people here. 75%. This is how it looks on a monitor-based one. So you can see successful windows which don't have a critical event because I've basically selected critical events as my breach. And you can see a whole period of time where we were running at, I think I've got it set at 90 something percent memory usage or CPU usage or something like that. And this is where we've breached it. And then we have, oh, it's brand new, so it's still populating that. But yeah, you can see large swathes of time where my application was running hot in theory. So that kind of covers some of the core stuff around SLOs. So the creating, monitoring, the cool dashboards that we get off the back of it, how to look at the different periods that we have once they've generated. But what other features do we offer you with SLOs? And I actually have our documentation up here just for this purpose. So we have a view called Sumo Logic SLO output, which is where we store all of the output for the SLOs. So let me just open up a log search here. And okay, 15 minutes. Let's have a bit more time. Let's give us 6 hours, shall we? And here we get some base information about our SLOs. So we got the SLO ID. We can see how many good periods of time there were and what the total number of periods or total number of requests was during that period, and the version of our SLO. As I mentioned, we do have version numbers for the SLOs. I can probably, if I just order that by version number. Yeah. So you can see these SLOs here. This one's been changed 4 times. So they start at 0, and then as you make any iterative changes to them, they will go that version number will go up. But one of the things that I can hear in people's heads, yes, I'm that psychic, is you're saying there's not much information here, Duncan. I don't know what I'd do with this. Well, that's where the second part of this comes in, which is a lookup. So I'm just going to pull this. I did actually have all this in a text file to copy from, but never mind. If I just plonk this in here, we have a lookup for content SLOs, where you can do it on the, so we've got the ID here and the version as kind of the keys to this. And it's going to give you a load more information about this. So we have our compliance target, what we're trying to meet. We have the information about the queries being run here. We then also have the signal type. We have the what evaluation we're using, window or request. We have what it's the SLO kind of parameter, less than, equal to. I can go on and on forever. Um, and we have all of that information at our fingertips, which basically means that you can pull this information in multiple ways. You can manipulate it how you want. And we do actually have other examples in here. Unfortunately, I'm not I didn't have time to build a lovely, pretty, multi kind of service dashboard for you, which is what I wanted to do. But you can pull, say, if you were the engineering manager for search service. I don't know why I keep picking on search service, but if I'm the engineering manager for search service and I want to see how all of my service is doing, and we've gone in and defined our SLIs and we've gone in and built the SLOs, I might want a single screen, a single kind of version of the truth where I can see at least high level details about these SLOs in one place. And you can basically use that lookup table and that view to build that. Because the other thing is, if we go and jump into our SLO here, and I was to open this in log search, guess what it's using? It's using that data. And you can kind of take these queries and meld them as you see fit and put them onto your own dashboard. And this is where those tags came in, by the way. So let's just go back to that search, if I can remember. There we go. So if we go back to the search, let's get rid of the order bar. I don't care for that anymore. And we're going to say we're going to basically extract the tag because the tags get stored as JSON. So we're just going to extract the tag service, and then we're going to say, oh, just realized because I pasted that. And then we're going to say where service basically equals Apache. So this should bring back only the SLOs relating to Apache. So we're looking at the last 6 hours, and here we go. So these now are only basically ones with the tag Apache in. Yeah. And pretty much they're ones I built while practicing this presentation for you all. So there's some of the cool things. That's some of the slightly advanced features. I don't necessarily have time if I want to include a Q&A to actually get into building that dashboard. But yeah, I hope you've learned something from today's session. And oh, I meant to go to bear with me a moment. And I'm happy to jump into a Q&A if anybody has any questions.
You got one in the Q&A text. I don't know if you even have that, Duncan, but I have it. Availability SLO. How is it different from error-based SLO that you've demonstrated? Some would measure availability based on errors versus success as you demoed, but what are the other ways to measure availability as you defined it in service availability SLO that we didn't get to see the process of building it?
Okay. I love that question, by the way. That's fantastic because in one of the iterations of this demonstration, and one of my practice runs, I actually talked about this because a client I was working with for about 2 years before, and that is exactly how they did their availability. Their availability metric was pretty much 500 errors. Anything that's if it's giving 500 errors, it's unavailable. The other ways you could look at it is more uptime, is kind of where I'm going with that. And my basic example, by the way, is very basic. Let me show you it. It really is a bit of a hack. Um, because in the environment I'm in, I don't have enough different types of commands to do it, but I'll show you my logic to what I was going for. So let me go to alerts, SLOs, um, DM SLOs. And so the other way to just to finish off answering the question before I jump into this bit, the other way that you'd do it is you might have a metric that's coming in like a keep alive metric, say that if you've got your service that's running, it's going to be a 1. If it can't contact your service, that metric's essentially a 0. That is one way you might do this. So basically you'll be looking for if that metric ever drops below 1. The other way you could do it is if for a 5-minute period you could sum that metric up and say if it's less than 3, then that period is a broken period. That would be one way I would recommend doing availability that's outside of the exact scenario that you mentioned, which is the scenario I demonstrated. But let's just take a look at this one. Let me just go into the edit menu of this one because we didn't do that earlier. So as I said, this one I'm kind of cheating, but a lot of services, especially microservices I've worked with in the past. So if you're looking at a multi A microservice architecture where you have multiple services, say running in Kubernetes or something like that, we tend to have health checks. So what I do for this one is I'm looking for health checks, and if the health check is success, as I said, I've kept this basic, but it might be that you're looking for successful health checks or failed health checks, and basically I do a count um, of these, but keeping it basic for this example just to get it working because the data's not in the training environment for Sumo Logic. I only managed to find one health check. But the way I would look at it is either using health check statuses, or if you do have that type of metric, a keep alive, for example, running. And if the keep alive stops, that would be a way to do it as well. I have done multiple ways of doing this in the past, but typically it comes down to say, is the service up, which is that 0 or 1 type number, which is essentially a keep alive. I hope that answers the question. If it doesn't, feel free to expand on the question.
Said, okay, understood. It's based on pulse health check. Thank you very much. Does anybody else have any questions for Duncan? All right. Well, if we don't have any more questions, Duncan, thank you so much. That was so informative and hands-on. That's a great way to teach. And thank you guys all for coming and hanging out with us and just supporting Sumo Logic. We love our community and getting to come and share stuff with you guys. I hope everybody has a wonderful day. Cheers.
Thank you very much, everybody.